There we go. So homework 24 starts off with graphing a circle. And the standard form of the circle says that if you have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared, it's equal to the radius squared. So since in here you have a minus sign, if you think of it, if I have x minus h equals 0, then x is going to equal the opposite because you have to move your h to the other side. So when you look at the general form of the circle, just think of that for the center, that you're going to use the opposite of these two values. They'll tell you that the center is going to be at h and k, but since you have the minus in there, you got to move it over, makes it the opposite sign. So on this one, if I have x minus 4 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 4, my center is going to be at a positive 4 and a negative 3. This number here, again, is squared, so the radius is going to be the square root of 4, which is 2, or if you put it in standard form, 2 squared is 4. So there's going to be a circle tool on the ALEKS program. You're going to click on that circle tool, click on the center first, so you'll go to 4, negative 3, and you'll click. Then it's going to put the circle there, and the circle's going to expand. You just need to move your mouse in whatever direction, doesn't matter, right, left, whatever. But if I do my radius and move over 2 places, it's going to make the circle 2 places around that. You don't have to go 2 places in every direction. It'll just expand it all the way around your center. So you click on the center, move over 2 places, and it'll draw your circle there. So on number 2, if I have x minus 3 squared plus y minus 4 squared, my center would be at 3, 4. And my radius would be 3. Square root of 9, which is 3. So I go to 3, 4, click, mark my center, then move over 3 places, 1, 2, 3, and it's going to draw my circle 3 places all the way around that dot. And so it looks something sort of like that if I could draw a circle. And the third one then, my center would be at
negative 5, negative 3.
Negative 5, negative 3. The opposite of each of those, and my radius
4.
is 4. Square root of 16 is 4. So negative 5, negative 3 is my center, and then 1, 2, 3, 4 places. So my circle would look something sort of like that. The next ones, they're going to have you graph the circle in what they call general form by putting it in standard form and completing the square. So when I do this, first of all, I'm going to put my x's together, my y's together, my constant term over on the other side of my equation. So I'm going to start with x squared minus 8x. I'm going to do completing the square, so I'm going to leave a space before I put my y squared plus y squared minus 6y. Leave a little spot because I'm going to put some stuff in there, and that's going to be a minus 21 instead of a plus 21, because when I move it over to the other side, I've got to change my sign. We are then going to do completing the square on the x's and on the y's. So again, we did completing the square before. We took half the middle number and squared it. So half of negative 8 is negative 4. A negative 4 squared is a positive 16. So I'm going to add 16 here. I also then have to add 16 to the other side of my equation, so my equation stays balanced. Then I'm going to do the same thing with my y's. Half of the negative 6 would be negative 3. A negative 3 squared is a positive 9. So I'm going to add 9 to both sides of my equations. This then should factor out into a perfect square. If I factored it the long way, x and x, the end is positive, so both sides are the same as the middle, negative and a negative, factors of 16 that add up to 8, 4, and 4. What it ends up being is just half that middle number, right? Half of negative 8 was negative 4, so x minus 4 squared. So same thing on this one. If I would have factored it out the long way, I would have had y minus 3 and y minus 3. Just taking half of that middle number tells you what that's going to be. And then on the other side, I'm going to do my adding and subtracting. Let's see, 16 and 9 is 25. 25 minus 21 would be 4. Now I have my equation in standard form. I can pick out my center and my radius. So my center would be at positive 4 and positive 3. My radius is the square root of 4, spell, which is 2. So over 4 up 3 with a radius of 2. And I have my circle. So number 5, I want to put my circle in standard form. So I'm going to have x squared minus 8x, leave a spot, plus my y squared plus 4y equals the negative 4 that's already over there. So if I complete my square on my x's, half of negative 8 would be negative 4, and negative 4 squared would be 16. So I'm going to add 16 to both sides. And then on my y's, half of 4 is 2, and 2 squared is positive 4, so I'm going to add 4 to both sides. So x squared minus 8x plus 16 would factor into
X minus 4 squared.
x minus 4 squared. And y squared plus 4y plus 4 would factor into
Y plus 2 squared.
y plus 2 squared. And over here, if I do my adding and subtracting, the 4's are going to cancel out, so I'm just going to get my 16 over there, right? So my center would be at 4, negative 2, and my radius
4.
is 4. Square root of 16 is 4. So 4, negative 2 with a radius of 4. Or something sort of like that. So number 6, we have x squared minus 6x plus y squared, no other y's, equals the 7 I've got to move to the other side, so it's going to be a positive 7. So if I complete the squares on my x's, I'm going to get
X minus 3 squared.
x minus 3, what would I have to add here? 9. Is that going to work out right? Something's not right, is it? Oh yeah, it is. It is, never mind. X minus 3 squared. Here I just have a y squared, so I don't need to complete my square on that one, and if I add 9 over here, I get 16, right? So my center on this one is going to be at
3, -1.
nope. The 3's right. What are you adding and subtracting from this? 0, right? So it's just going to be at 3, 0. And my radius
4.
is 4. So 3, 0 would be right there. And my radius of 4. Would look something sort of like that. So yes, if I really wanted to, I could write that as y minus 0 squared. The next ones, these ones they say they're advanced because now they're going to throw coefficients in front of the x squareds and the y squareds. So again, I'm going to start by putting my x's together, my y's together, and my number over on the other side. So 4x squared plus 32x plus 4y squared minus 24y going to equal negative 91. Now, some books do this differently, but I would just go ahead and divide by my coefficient of 4 first, because you're going to have to get rid of it eventually anyway. So I'm just going to divide everything by 4. So here I'm going to get x squared plus 8x plus y squared minus 6y. And I'm just going to leave that as negative 91/4 because I don't think I can reduce it down. And then I'm going to go ahead and complete my square. So half of 8 is 4. 4 squared is 16. So I'm going to add 16 here and add 16 here. Half of negative 6 is negative 3. Negative 3 squared is positive 9. So I'm going to add 9 there. So I'm going to get x plus 4 squared here. I'm going to get y minus 3 squared there. And then I got to do my adding and subtracting. I'd probably just grab my calculator, otherwise you got to make your common denominator 4. So if I do negative 91/4 plus my 16 plus my 9, and I'm going to change it to an improper fraction, I'm going to end up with 9/4. So my center on this one is going to be at negative 4, positive 3. My radius is going to be the square root of 9/4. Well, the square root of 9 is 3. The square root of 4 is 2. 3 over 2 is 1.5, or 1.5. So my center, negative 4, 3. So negative 4, positive 3. Then I'm going to move over 1.5 all the way around my dot, and my circle would look something sort of like that. Now if you do end up with something that doesn't come out to be a perfect square, then there's a mistake somewhere in there, because all of these should come out so that you can take the square rid of them. Otherwise it'd be pretty hard to graph. So number 8, we've got 2x squared minus 16x plus 2y squared minus 8y, and then I'm going to move my 32 to the other side, so minus 32. And so in this case, I would want to divide everything by 2. they're not going to give you anything that doesn't have the same coefficient in front of your x squared and your y squared, so they all should work out nice. I'm going to divide everything by 2, so I get x squared minus 8x plus y squared minus 4y equals negative 16 then. So if we complete our square on the first one, we would add 16, and on our y's we would add 4. So our equation in standard form would be you guys are making Gavin do all the work today. They're still sleeping. X minus 4 squared plus
Y minus 2 squared.
y minus 2 squared equals 4. So my center would be at positive 4 and positive 2. My radius would be the square root of 4, which is 2. So 4, 2 with the radius of 2. Number 9. See, they already throw a crazy fraction in there. So again, I have 2x squared minus 18x plus 2y squared plus 12y equals a negative 101 over 2. So when I divide everything by 2, I would get x squared minus 9x plus y squared plus 6y. And when you take a negative 101 over 2 divided by 2, it's like multiplying by a half, right? So you get negative 101 over 4. Right? Multiplying, or dividing by 2 is multiplying by a half, so I just end up multiplying my denominator by 2. So negative 101 over 4. And so when we complete the square, on the first one we're going to add, oh, we get to add a lovely fraction. You took half of this, right? Which would be negative 9 over 2, and then you square them. So if you square them, you're going to get 81 over 4, if I use my improper fraction, which I'm going to do. On the other one, we're going to add 9. Which I could write as 36 over 4, since everything else is over 4. So if I do my adding and subtracting there, I get 16 fourths, right? Which is just 4. So I'm going to have x minus 9 halves squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 4. 16 fourths or 4. So my center is going to be at 9 halves or 4 halves, 4 and a half I should say, 4.5 and negative 3. My radius is going to be 2. So 4.5 and negative 3, 1, 2, 3, and then my radius is 2. would look something sort of like that. So occasionally they'll throw in some fraction one just because they know you like to work with fractions. (10, 11, 12), writing an equation of a circle given the center and the point on the circle. So if we go back to standard form of our equation, we have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals our radius squared. If I know what my center is, I can plug those in for h and k. So I would have x minus 0 squared plus y minus 6 squared equals my radius squared. What I'm then going to do is use this point, put them in for the x and the y so that I can find out what the r squared, the radius squared value is. And so I'm going to put -5 in for my x, 1 in for my y. -5 minus 0 is still -5. A -5 squared would be positive 25. 1 minus 6, going to be -5. -5 squared is also 25. So 25 plus 25 would give me 50 for the value of the radius squared. We're then just going to put our equation in standard form. If I have x minus 0 squared, I really don't need that 0. I'm just going to write it as x squared. Then I had plus y minus 6 squared. And then my r squared value was 50. And that's going to be the equation of my circle then. So number 11 says find the equation of the circle that has a center at -5, -4, and passes through -6, 1. So again, if I'm putting it in the standard form, if I have x minus a -5, we're going to write it as x plus 5, right? We know that if the center was at -5, that we had an x plus 5 in our standard form. And if we had a -4 then, we would have had y plus 4. So x plus 5 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals our radius squared, and then we've got to find what r squared is equal to. So we're going to put -6 in for x, 1 in for y, and so on. So -6 plus 5 is -1. -1 squared is positive 1. 1 plus 4 is 5. 5 squared is 25. And so 1 plus 25 gives us 26 for the value of r squared. So the equation of our circle, x plus 5 squared plus y plus 4 squared equals 26. So number 6, if I want to find the equation of the circle that has a center at 6, 4 and passes through the point 5, -4. Starting out, putting my center in, my equation would look like what?
X minus 6 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals r squared.
Okay, plugging in our 5 and our -4, we would then get what?
One.
1 plus
0.
what was that?
0.
No, because it's a -4 and a -4.
Oh.
So -8 squared would give me 64, right? So 1 plus 64 gives us 65 for the value of r squared. So our equation, x minus 6 squared plus y minus 4 squared equals 65. And the last three on this page, we want to write the equation of a circle given that we know the endpoints. Well, if we know the endpoints, we can find the center of the circle by using the midpoint formula, right? Midpoint formula says that we add our x's and divide by 2 and add our y's and divide by 2. So I'm going to have 0 plus 3 divided by 2, which gives me 3 halves. And then I'm going to have 4 plus 6 divided by 2. 10 over 2 is 5. So I know my center is going to be at 3 halves and 5. So I'm going to say x minus 3 halves squared plus y minus 5 squared equals r squared. Now again, depending on which book you use, there's two different methods here. One of them just does what we did on the previous one, which is what I would do, substitute in for x and y and find r squared. The other one has you use the distance formula, because the radius would be the distance from the center outward. Well, that's way too much work. So, personally, I would just pick one of my endpoints, doesn't matter which one you use, and find r squared. So I would put 0 in for x. Whoops, I better use the right number though. 3. I put 3, 4 in for y, 0, 4 for my x and my y, and solve. So here I'm going to get negative 3 halves squared, which would give me a positive 9 fourths. 4 minus 5 is negative 1. Negative 1 squared would be positive 1. So that would be 4 fourths plus 9 fourths, which would give me 13 fourths for r squared. And so then my equation, x minus 3 halves squared plus y minus 5 squared equals 13 fourths. You guys are so quiet today. Are you still asleep? Baby just now, she says, I'm here. All right. So 14, if I'm going to find my center, I'm going to find the midpoint between there. And so adding my x's and dividing by 2, I would get negative a half. And adding my y's and dividing by 2, I'm going to get positive a half. So my center, negative a half and positive a half. So my equation is going to be x plus 1/2 squared plus y minus a half squared equals my radius squared. And so if I use the 5 and the negative 1 in for my x and my y, five plus 1/2 would be 11 halves, and if I square 11 halves, I get 121 over 4. Negative 1 minus 1/2 would give me negative 3/2, and if I square a negative 3/2, I get 9/4. So if I take 121/4 plus 9/4, I get 130/4, which I could reduce down to 65/2. So my equation, x plus 1/2 squared plus y minus 1/2 squared equals 65/2. And the last one. Find the equation of the circle whose diameter has endpoints of 4, 1, and 0, -2. So, adding my x's and dividing by 2, I would get 2. And adding my y's and dividing by 2, I would get -1/2. So my equation's going to start out with x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1/2 squared equals my r squared. And you want to put in 4, 1 or 0, -2? 4, 1, okay. So, 4 minus 2 squared would give me 4. And 1 plus 1/2 squared. 3/2 squared, which is 9/4, right? So this would be 16/4 plus 9/4, which would give me 25/4, right? So the equation of the circle, x minus 2 squared plus y plus 1/2 squared equals 25/4. Easy enough, right?